Hello, this is George Hutton, and you are listening to the Mind Persuasion Podcast. Today we continue our study of weaponized hypnosis. For more information, please visit mindpersuasion.com/weaponized-hypnosis. Today's podcast, we will continue with our fully written examples of stories. Today's story is called The Closet. 1. Stories in their natural order. Story 1 is about a Japanese guy with a woman living in his closet. 1A. Japanese guy lived alone. 1B. He noticed his food was disappearing. 1C. Finally called the cops. 1D. The cops found a woman living in his closet. 1E. Old crazy homeless woman had been there for 3 months. Story 2. Screaming woman in Tokyo. 2A. Crazy lady in Tokyo. 2B. Always screaming. 2C. Neighbors always calling the cops. 2D. Cops finally go into her apartment. 2E. Found 4 dead babies in the closet. Story 3. All the crazy people in the world. 3A. Lots of crazy people. 3B. Easy to not notice. 3C. Used to have institutions. 3D. But laws changed in the 80s. 3E. Now crazy people live on the streets. Story 4. Mental illness is a big problem. 4A. Mental illness is a serious problem. 4B. Often unexpected. 4C. Can happen to anybody. 4D. One day living a normal life. 4E. Next day you're insane. 2. Stories in the order to tell them. 1A. Japanese salaryman. 1B. He noticed food was missing. 1C. Called the cops. 2A. Crazy lady in Tokyo. 2B. Always screaming. 2C. Finally the cops came. 3A. Lots of crazy people. 3B. Easy to not notice. 3C. Used to live in institutions. 4A. Mental illness a big problem. 4B. Never know when it will happen. 4C. Unpredictable. 4D. One day normal. 4E. Next day insane. 3D. Laws changed. 3E. Now out on the streets. 2D. Went into her apartment. 2E. Found 4 dead babies in the closet. 1D. Cops find woman living in his closet. 1E. Had been there for 3 months. Part 3. Word for word script. R is anchor. SP self-point. Man, I read this crazy news story today. You know how they have weird news stories from around the world, right? Well, the other day I read a doozy. Turned out there was this Japanese guy, one of those workaholic salarymen. He would come home every night, 10, 11 at night, no wife or kids, but he noticed that his food was missing. I mean, he would remember how much he had left because he would check to see if he needed to stop on his way home and buy more. But there was always a little bit less when he got home at night. At first, he thought he just couldn't remember. You know how you forget things are, and your memories start to blur? That's what he thought was happening, so he started to write stuff down. And there was less at night than there was in the morning, so he thought maybe his neighbor was pranking him, right? I mean, that would suck to think that your neighbors are sneaking into your place during the day when you go to work, right? So he finally called the cops. There was this other story about this lady in Tokyo. It didn't say how old she was, but they said for years she just kept screaming and screaming. The neighbors were going crazy. I mean, imagine that, R. You live next door to this person, this crazy person, SP, who just starts screaming all the time. They kept calling the cops, and finally one day they came over. I mean, they would drive by and then she'd stop screaming. The cops maybe thought the lady's neighbors were the ones that were crazy, right? I mean, something like that happens and nobody knows what's really true and what's really imaginary, SP, right? But I guess there are a lot of mental illnesses, SP. I mean, a lot of crazy people, SP, in the world. I don't know about Japan, but I guess in the States, up until the 80s or so, they had institutions and things for people who are crazy, SP. I mean, even today, unless you're really looking, unless you have a reason to become interested in mental illness, R, unless you want to start looking for crazy people, R, it's hard to notice them, R, unless they are right in front of you, SP. Even the idea of mental illness is pretty hard to wrap your mind, R, around. I mean, it's not like they know what the cause is. I mean, they call it mental illness or whatever, but nobody really knows. I mean, most people don't have any idea that they are going to go insane, R. I mean, one day your life is normal and then things start to slip. I mean, you start to forget things, R. Maybe one day you start to hear voices, R. Pretty soon you can't understand what's real and what's not. Maybe you start to have hallucinations, R. Maybe you start to see demons, SP, everywhere. And pretty soon you go off from having a normal life with normal friends, and then you are forgotten by everybody and you have to live on the street, R. Surrounded by imaginary people who are always trying to kill you, R. But before the 80s at least, the mentally ill people had a place to stay, although they were pretty poor conditions. I mean, one of the reasons they closed all the insane asylums is because once you got locked up, you never had a hope of getting out. I mean, imagine that, R. If you had to live in a mental hospital, R. Always being abused by the staff, laying there awake at night wondering when they would come in and mess with you. I don't know if it's any better now. I mean, they are all out on the street. I suppose maybe it's better in some ways, worse in a lot of other ways. Either way, once you are in that position, you have to give up hope, R, right? But finally, the cop showed up. The lady was still screaming and they went into her apartment and the smell was just horrible. They looked around and she had like 4 fetuses in the closet. I guess that's why she lost her mind. She'd go out, get pregnant, and then toss the kid in the closet, R, and leave it there, R. Isn't that horrible? I wonder how she slept at night, knowing what was in the closet. Can you imagine that, R? Every time you're lying there trying to fall asleep, you can't help but imagine what's in the closet, SP. Would that make you go insane, R? But the guy called the cops, and check this out. They came and looked around his apartment, and there was this old homeless woman living in the closet. She'd followed him up one night after he'd gone out drinking after work, and she's been there for 3 months. He thought he was alone at home when the whole time there was an old homeless woman living in his closet. Can you imagine that, R? Every time you're in bed, there's somebody, SP, in your closet just waiting for you to go to sleep, R. I don't think I'd be able to handle that. I think that would make me go insane, R. I'm George Hutton. Thank you for listening to the Mind Persuasion Podcast. For more information, please visit mindpersuasion.com/weaponized-hypnosis. Thank you for listening. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.